Listeners, you've heard about War for the Tower. Now go listen to it. You'll enjoy it, I promise. warforthetower.com.
This is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Unspoiled, covering Doctor Who, Season 7, Episode 11, The Crimson Horror. In this episode, the Queen of Thorns is being eaten alive by a weird leech thing that looks more like a lobster? What the hell is going on in this one? This one's real baffling to me. However, aesthetically, I'm on board. Welcome to Unspoiled. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha.
I'm Jamie.
All right. So first out of the gate, I really want to know what your experience is with this episode. As usual, I like to hear what you felt the first time versus what you think this time.
This one was weird.
Yeah.
I think the first time I saw it, I was like, what a strange episode. Because it goes for a very long time before we see the Doctor. So I thought that this was another one of those Dr. Light episodes. And I was like, this is cool. We got Vastra and Jenny and Strax and one of their adventures. That's a good way to do one of these Dr. Light episodes.
Right.
But then it's not. And it's strange.
Yeah.
And I didn't know then who Diana Rigg was. I think I knew that, back in the day she was in that show, The Avengers. But I wasn't like up on who she was. Now, rewatching, I was like, oh, it's the Queen. It's the Queen. It's the Queen.
In every sense.
Yeah. God, she's so great.
She's super good. I love her. Yeah,
So,
it
yeah,
was a weird thing, too, for me, where normally when there's somebody that's sort of, like, hidden and they talk about them in a weird way, I assume that it's the Doctor, and it's not a surprise. But this one, it didn't even occur to me that he was the Doctor. So when she walks in there and it's him, I was like, oh, shit. Okay. That's surprising.
Yeah.
Because he's not normally, like, totally disabled in this way.
Yeah. Yeah. And they kind of explain how he ended up that way, but I don't completely understand what they were doing to the people in the first place. So the fact that whatever it was didn't work on him, fine. It makes sense.
This is something that I think, so this ties in with what we were going to talk about anyway, because Jamie and I were discussing the fact that we will occasionally get criticism, such as in the last review, where somebody was saying that there aren't plot holes and that we are just not paying enough attention or miss things. And really the thing that I can only say to that is bullshit, because if there aren't plot holes, there will be plenty of people to tell us what we missed. And there are so many instances of nobody telling us that we missed anything or agreeing with us that doesn't really make sense. And it's not like we don't have super fans who listen to the show who would let us know.
Case in point, Sean Sheridan left me a message in the Whovian group saying that other rooms of the TARDIS have been seen before in previous seasons, mostly in Classic Who. Bedrooms, food machine room, the swimming pool, Eye of Harmony room, and the Zero room have all been seen, and more have all been seen. So most of it's happened in Old Who, Classic Who.
Okay.
I
to
get
me,
a
that
lot
doesn't count. I'm only going to count that we are watching ourselves. Everything else is off the table.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole, 40 plus years of show that most of us don't even have access to. Some of which is lost forever.
Yeah.
I get my information about that kind of stuff from a Doctor Who wiki. If that Doctor Who wiki says, this is the most we've ever seen of the TARDIS, I have no choice but to believe it until I'm corrected. And so a correction like this I appreciate, because I literally didn't know that, and my resource did not tell me it.
Right.
Kat Slater is always great about filling in some of the holes that we might have or questions we might have. Mm-hmm. But sometimes people are like, you guys just are seeing plot holes that aren't there. You're not paying attention. And it's like, but we're picking it apart, trying to fill that hole. Mm-hmm. And we can't do it based on what we've seen. And that's not our fault. And that's not us trying to tear the show apart for the fun of it.
Right.
It really is that we're like, here, this is a question I have. And there isn't context in the show to answer it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it comes down to, like, you watch these episodes multiple times. I watched them the one time, but, you know, and I'm new to this. But if both of us are missing something that, like, is supposed to be important, I feel like that's the show failing. Because both of us shouldn't be able to completely miss something that is allegedly crucial to filling a plot hole. If it somehow bypasses us both, that's a bad sign. That's not us. So, you know, I am absolutely willing to admit that I'm not going to catch everything and I will miss stuff. And that does happen. But the idea that there are no plot holes and that it's like often just us failing to pay attention is just frankly laughable. This is the whole thing that we're like watching these episodes and only watching them and paying full attention is literally the whole job. Mm-hmm. And I am not like on my phone watching these episodes. Like, that's not how I really, like, there's occasionally times where I need to check my email and I'll pick something up. And almost always I stop and rewind or I'll pause it when I do that because I know that I don't want to miss stuff and I don't want to fall into that sort of trap of thinking that there's a plot hole when there isn't. But,
I was telling you, I put the subtitles on for two reasons. One, oftentimes they are talking very fast.
Yeah, Matt Smith especially.
Yes. But also, there will be details in that dialogue that I want to pay attention and make sure I'm not missing something that they're saying that might be important later. Because it's not like I get distracted, but sometimes information comes very quickly, and if I blink or I look away for a second to, like, my cat is climbing on me, I might miss something. Mm-hmm. So I make sure I have those subtitles on, and if I have a question, like, did I miss something? I'll go back and make sure, like, why don't I understand what they're talking about? What did I miss? Mm-hmm. And I'll go back and catch what I missed. I'm very much paying attention. And like, sometimes I just don't have an answer.
I will sometimes miss things. Like, it's happened where you and I will be talking about a thing and you'll be like, no, he said such and such. And I'm like, what? And yeah, you're right. I did somehow completely miss that. But you caught it. Like, it's not that neither of us, and what always sort of is the red flag for me is when people try and insist there are no plot holes, but they don't provide examples of what we said a plot hole was that they have an answer to fill the hole with. They almost always are just like wanting us to believe on their word that there aren't any, which I got news for y'all. I don't think I've ever watched a show that didn't have at least like a couple. Yeah. There are very few that don't have any.
It's really hard to do this type of project where you are discussing basically dialogue line by dialogue line and scene by scene what is happening in a television show. Mm-hmm. And not find questions or little instances of like, oh, that person clearly has plot armor.
Right.
And in any other circumstance, they would be dead. Or, you know, like things where it sounds like a criticism, but it's not criticism.
It's just dealing with the reality of what a TV show has to do, how they have to be written. Like, we understand that. And you can still criticize it and understand it.
Yeah. Chris and I were talking about Vampire Diaries. There was an episode last week or the week before where the character Stefan should have been dead. They should have killed him because the character he was arguing with is a vampire hunter who stabbed him with a stake in the stomach. And I was like, you know why he got stabbed in the stomach? Because he's a main character on this show.
Right.
He should have been killed. That guy's a vampire hunter.
He knows not to do the fucking stomach. Yeah.
Right. So it's like, Stefan has plot armor, and it is what it is. But in reality, like, if that were real, he should have been dead. And that's just something that we're going to be like, okay, well, I have to give it a pass because Stefan's the main character.
Right.
So there's always going to be something, even something we love, like, a lot. Like, I love The Vampire Diaries. I love Doctor Who. I love Lost. Love Lost. But Krista had complaints. She had criticisms, and I was like, yeah, it's valid. Still love it.
Krista
doesn't make me love it any less.
Was the me on Lost that I am on Doctor Who.
Yes, she was the unspoiled one, and she would have criticisms, or she'd be like, this is really stupid. Why is this person acting this way? Or why did this thing happen? And I'd be like, because they needed it to. And sometimes you got to do that for the enjoyment of the show.
And, you know, again, I just want to emphasize that I am not trying to say that Jamie and I are perfect and we're never going to miss anything. I'm just saying that if it's something that both of us miss and you have to explain it, I think that's evidence that the show didn't do a good job. And also, I will say this as well, and this is just sort of a subjective thing, but when somebody tries to say, well, they do explain that and blah, 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 if it's something that you and I haven't picked up on and they are telling us separately somewhere else, well, I always thought it was this. The I always thought is evidence of a headcanon, not something that the show says. And oftentimes it's really weak. Like I have come across this a few times, not just with Doctor Who, but like in other spaces as well, where people try to say, well, that was explained. And then they repeat something that they said on the show that we already discussed in the podcast and agreed was not a sufficient explanation. You know, just repeating back like, well, they said it was this and that's the explanation. No, it's not. They said it was this. I don't believe it was that. It's not good enough. It doesn't hold up. And it certainly, like, a lot of times there will be like a bit of a retcon involved, or it won't agree with something that happened in another episode a while back that they seem to have forgotten about. You know, it's like the whole thing with the alien on the submarine, where we're all supposed to just act like he was being treated in a certain way and pretend that we never saw him murder somebody out of the gate from the cold open. You know, just that sort of thing where it's like, yeah, and a lot of shows are guilty of that, of like forgetting their own shit and then pretending it never happened.
Yeah, they just kind of forgot.
Yeah, exactly. And if they forgot, then they just forgot. Like, it's not like I'm fucking putting somebody on a pillory, you know, like they just, that happens. Yeah. You know, pillorying them in the town square.
Okay.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
But yeah, I take umbrage with the assertion sometimes. The only time that I have really understood the complaint is Owen and I covered, Avatar, The Last Airbender, and both of us were unspoiled for that. And in that case, there is stuff that we both missed because we are both being unspoiled, sort of paying attention to the same sorts of things. And somebody who is like, who has seen the show before might be paying attention to something else that would explain that. Whereas he and I tend to miss it because we're both more interested in like the spectacle of somebody bending such and such or whatever. And in that sense, that one I can agree that there were things that we missed, but we did eventually get it because everybody yelled at us and it was fine. You know, it happens.
That's why this format works really well, because you may only watch the episode once, but I've seen some of these multiple times. Every one of them I've seen multiple times because I've rewatched for this show. But some of those earlier seasons I've watched 4 or 5 times anyway. And honestly, a lot of the things that you pointed out were things that I just never really thought about because I wasn't watching it with a critical eye. Yeah. And don't take the word critical as negative. This is a critical format. We are discussing the show, and there were things that you'd point out and I'd be like, you know what? It didn't bother me because I wasn't paying attention to that. Yeah. That wasn't something that was standing out to me, but you're right. And sometimes I don't agree, but it's like, it's okay.
Yeah, I think that's key, is like realizing that being critical isn't necessarily being negative. you know, and I understand if people want to be protective of something that they love. But
Absolutely.
I think that if your thing that you love can't withstand criticism, that is not the fault of somebody who is criticizing.
Right.
That's
and,
like, you go deal with your own baggage on that. It's fine.
And just keep in mind, I do love Doctor Who.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. But it's not perfect. And it's not faultless. But I love it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm being critical, it's not because, or if I'm being critical in a negative way, it's not because I dislike the show. It's because I dislike this portion of writing.
Right.
Because I want it to be, it has the potential. There's no reason for it to be lazy. And sometimes it is.
Yeah. I think that can be what's most at the root of my frustration in general when I like find something that I'm bothered by, is just that it was something really easy to not do.
Yeah.
That I am sort of baffled at the choice that they made to include it at all, or have, you know, because it just, for me, didn't add anything and just brings up questions that they choose not to answer. And I'm like, well, then why bother?
Then why ask the question?
Yeah.
Which is a hilarious thing for me to say as a super fan of Lost. But I also am one of those people that's like, I don't give a fuck about the questions, because for me it was about the people. So you can fuck off with your questions. But in this show, sometimes it really is all about the questions they're asking. And then I'm like, but your answers are bad. So why are you asking these questions?
And I think, like, in this show in particular, the fact that the Doctor is meant to be such like a super genius and they still fall into that trap, I think that's what sticks in my craw. That he is supposed to be really smart, and I'm supposed to believe that he's really smart. But then they leave stuff that's open like that, that I feel like is careless or just silly. And I'm like, y'all need to rep better. If you want me to believe that this guy is as smart as you say, I need him to not... That's not to say that he can't be a flawed character. That's not the same thing.
Right.
But when there's, you know, just like pulling something out of our ass that, oh yeah, well, we have a teleportation bracelet that my friend had somehow for no reason that we're just going to use now.
The Deus Ex Machina of, like, suddenly we have this very simple solution that we could have used 43 minutes ago, but we're just going to use it now at minute 52.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think sometimes it's that this show is not as much at this point for children as the earlier stuff, but it still is sort of simplified for younger audiences. Mm-hmm. And so we might have issues because we're expecting it to be at a level intellectually that it's dumbing itself down, but I don't feel like it should be dumbing itself down.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of stuff that's like sort of meant for kids that manages to still be cohesive.
Yeah.
You know, I think the other problem is like what you said about Lost is, for me, fuck the questions. It's about the people. And when I think the Doctor's an asshole most of the time, and the companions can often be written in vague, mysterious circumstances that gives them very little personality, that isn't there for me. I don't love the characters enough to pardon some of the other stuff, especially now that Rory's gone. Rory could get away with anything because I love him.
Sure.
But
I was singing his praises yesterday out of nowhere. Started just talking about Legends of Tomorrow, and I was like, let me just go on a 14-minute love fest over Rory Williams and how much I miss him. And my boyfriend was just sitting there playing video games. I was like, I know you don't care. I need to talk about Rory.
Yeah, so I think that I will be willing a lot of the time. I think that was like with Buffy, how it got away with a lot. Buffy is not a perfect show in any case. Like, holy shit, it is riddled with flaws.
Yeah.
But I loved everybody so much that I was fine with that. I didn't care. And Doctor Who has just not really come through for me character-wise for a lot of people. I like this Doctor more than the others, but the Doctor in general, I just find frustrating a lot of the time. And his companions have been such a mixed bag.
Yeah.
You know, I haven't, and I think having the companions be so varied is some of the, like, I don't have as much time to really fall in love with somebody because we only spend a season or two and then they're gone.
Yeah.
And it's sort of a weird thing to just, like, start over every season with somebody new. That's a hard thing to pull off in the best of times, you know? Mm-hmm. So... yeah,
I never really thought about it in that way.
Yeah,
because
it's like...
some companions sort of come out of the gate really fully formed. Mm-hmm. Donna was a fully formed idea from the start.
Right.
And I feel like Rose kind of was as well. Clara for sure is not. Amy was halfway there, and then really they grew her into a much better character than I think she started out as.
Yeah, agree with that. And I think it's no accident that they managed to grow her into a better character because they spent more time with her than anybody. Mm-hmm. Like, wasn't she with the Doctor the longest? So far out of the, like, New Who?
Season 5, 6, and 5 episodes of 7. So only barely more than Rose.
Really? I thought Rose was
2 full seasons, and Amy was 2 seasons plus 5 episodes. So she had a slightly more time than Rose.
Okay.
But different person writing her. And then we got to, you know, with the Rory factor, we just got to see a different part of Amy that wasn't all about the Doctor, which I think really benefited the character.
Agreed, yeah. I was actually going to mention that the fact that even when they change up companions, the fact that they chose to make almost all of them in love with him was also like a big flaw in their thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I'm glad they're not doing that with Clara, seemingly.
Yeah, apparently. It doesn't feel that way. It feels like she's, like, totally willing to flirt with him. And it's not like I wouldn't say that she finds him, like, repellent or anything. Not the way that Donna did. Bless her heart. But it just doesn't seem like, you know, she's not pining. There isn't a whole thing.
No, I don't think that I think, and this is a headcanon thing for me with Clara, because there's not a lot of substance for me to really have a good feel of her character, who she is. But what I've gotten from her is she'll flirt with him, but she'd probably flirt with anyone.
Right.
She just seems like that kind of girl. Agreed. Where she could probably flirt her way into and out of most things.
I like that. That's something in her personality that I can cling to and be like, same.
Yeah. I want them to write her with a little more substance. Mm-hmm. Because right now she still feels like a cipher.
Yeah.
And I think that that's doing the actress a disservice, because she's a good actress. She's not just unrealistically beautiful. But she's also a good actress, and I feel like she deserves more. And she's been on the show now for, what episode are we on, 11?
Yeah.
5 episodes? Plus the one with Amy and Rory, so 6. 7, including that. So, like, 7 episodes because of the Christmas special.
Okay, yeah.
And we still don't really understand who she is as a person. Mm-hmm. And I think that's not fair. And it's really hard to feel any stakes. You know, she gets sort of sidelined in this episode. She's frozen in time or whatever. And part of me is like...
whatever.
And?
Yeah. It's honestly, as much as I know that the other versions of her that we have seen weren't her, like, she's not reincarnating, or maybe she is reincarnating. How do I fucking know? But they aren't the same person. She had a different name, and she doesn't remember the other stuff. But I'm sorry, this dog is barking so loud, and
dog
it's
sounds
so
like
distracting.
It sounds like it's in your house.
Oh my god, it's right outside my window. Now I lost track of what I was saying.
it's not like she's the same person as before.
Yeah, I don't remember what I meant.
I feel like the version of her that was in the Dalek had a substantial personality. I got a feel for who she was. I feel like the version of her that was in Victorian London had a personality, had something going on. You know, her whole, like, pretending to be a governess, pretending to be posh, but also being a barmaid, and being clever, following the Doctor, like, figuring things out. Those were traits, actual traits. And this Clara, I still don't know.
Yeah.
And I should know her a bit better by now. They're keeping her a mystery to us.
I was going to say that I didn't feel the stakes with her being, like, frozen or whatever. Because she comes, like, we've seen her kind of come back, like, be okay and be around, even though it's not the same version of her. Yeah. It feels like it's kind of the same version of her to us, because we don't get to know her that well. So there's just a sense when something happens to her where I'm just like, whatever, there'll be another one. You know what I mean?
It's like Cylons.
A little bit.
Yeah, like, oh, I really love Boomer, but she'll be back.
Spoilers. All right, so let's actually talk about the episode, shall we? Shall we do that?
Yeah.
This really fucking bizarre episode. And I'm so glad to hear that you don't really know what was being done to them either. Because I swear to God, I rewound a few places. And I almost even, like, I got frustrated enough that I almost went ahead and, like, went onto the wiki for just this episode. But then I didn't, because I wikied another episode for Buffy all these years ago. And it just said something about somebody, like, you know, getting this, like, injury, and it was not in that episode or really related to anything that happened in that episode, but they mentioned it anyway, and it was, like, a complete spoiler. So I get very paranoid now.
Yeah, my days of reading spoilers stopped with Buffy as well, because I got spoiled to a death that wasn't happening for, like, 5 or 6 episodes, and I spent the next 5 or 6 episodes knowing that a character was going to die.
Yeah.
And so when it happened, it didn't have the kind of impact on me that it should have.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm never reading spoilers again.
Mm-hmm. I know people who are totally fine with reading spoilers, and they feel that it doesn't interfere with their enjoyment at all. And, like, if it doesn't bother you, then that's fine. But I just don't really understand how it can't have an effect. It's just such a huge part of it to me, is, like, the surprise of things.
Yeah. I mean, I'll read spoilers for reality shows because I don't give a fuck. But if it's a show I love, I don't want to. Even something as something like Grey's Anatomy, which, I mean, there's not mystery in Grey's Anatomy. It's a medical show, but I don't want to know what's going to happen to the characters on that show. I want to experience it purely because spoilers will affect how I am affected. And I'm emotional about characters. So when something happens to them, I want to feel that emotion. I don't want to be like, I knew it was happening though, so now I feel nothing. Dead inside.
Nothing. So do you have any, like, theories, or is there any information that you found about that, like, details a little bit more of what was going on there?
No, it's just that they're preserving them in some way. But what the show explains to us is that this little red leech from the, you know, prehistoric era that Vastra's from,
right,
makes a poison that could kill the Silurians too. Those little things were a big problem for the Silurians, and that she wants to put this poison in the air and kill everybody, and she's preserving them so that she could start a new Eden, essentially.
I guess. Yeah.
But is she dipping? I guess we see her sort of dipping them into this red slime.
Mm-hmm. The venom.
Right. But I don't know, like, how they survive. Why did it turn the Doctor into sort of a slow-moving, lockjawed, red person?
Mm-hmm. And why, and I know why, but why does the sonic screwdriver, like, cure him. I can't with the fact that like cured him. That really was it? You just needed your screwdriver? Like, this is like a medical problem. It shouldn't be that easy, guys.
And why does she feel like it only works on beautiful people?
I don't think that I think she only wants beautiful people because that's what Eden is supposed to be. Because she's a fucking, like, phrenologist. Like, yeah.
And what exactly did she do to her daughter to blind her? Did she put the leech on the daughter's face?
That's the other thing, which is like, I was experimenting to find out how much of the venom. Then why is it only scarring on her face? Because I would think that you would have to, like, fucking dunk her in order to try this out. And I don't understand why it's just on her eyes. And how did you experiment on her without her knowing that that was what you were doing?
Yeah.
You're telling a story about how this dude, like, beat her up.
Her father, I think she said.
And the daughter doesn't gainsay her. It's like the daughter believes it. And I don't understand how that's supposed to work. Where she was, like, fooled or willing to keep the secret for some reason? Why? What did her, like... All I can think is that her mother's just, like, tossing poison in her eyes and then being like, gotcha! Like...
I guess maybe that's what we're supposed to believe. It's, like, basically, like, acid thrown in a girl's face.
And so how does she not know that or hold it against her mother? Did she agree to the experimentation? No, she can't have agreed because she's shocked when she overhears that was what her mom was doing.
Yeah.
And she's like, you tell me it isn't true.
Maybe she did it to her while she was sleeping.
But then you would know it wasn't that you got beat up. And would know your mom's a giant liar.
Yeah. Hey, guys, this is a plot hole.
And, like, if there are any of you screaming about how it's not really, please feel free to tell us. I say that every time. If there's something that we missed, I want you to let us know. But I reserve the right to call bullshit on whatever it is, because it might not be very convincing. That's all.
Yeah. These are legitimate questions about how this episode functions and what we're supposed to just take as fact when there's a question. Like, how did this happen to this girl? And how is she still so devoted to her mother?
And the whole thing with, like, sometimes it goes wrong and they just turn bright red, I guess, because of this venom being red and it, like, soaks into them. The idea that she has gotten away with this for this long, with this bizarre fucking side effect that happens, and nobody has thought, like, enough to look into it.
Well, they did. The guy that
goes and finds the doctor.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
No, not... Yeah, the guy who goes and finds the doctor, the one who, like, dies at the beginning, but we don't see him until later.
Right.
Yeah. But he's like an investigative journalist or something, but where are the bobbies on this? Where are the police?
That was what I meant by nobody's looking into this. Like, she's offering this, like, gated community that people are signing up for, and there's no external power that's sort of like, all right, but what's going on here? Do you have the permits for this? Whose land is this? Are you allowed, like, what? Nobody's coming out again. People haven't heard from their family anymore. This is very suspicious. The scale of this thing is part of what doesn't work here. Is if she had this, like, be a sort of, like, secret sign-up thing that she's going over to communities that are, like, you know, underprivileged or at risk somehow and convincing them that this will help. That would be one thing because it would feel like sort of under the table. But this is hugely public. I mean, you could just be anybody and go and sign up. She doesn't actually even, like, try and check and make sure who you are. When the doctor shows up with Clara, they're literally Mr. and Mrs. Smith. And she's like, yeah, that's believable. Mm-hmm. And why does this leech want her to do this? Or does it care? Is this just her invention and she's like...
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not directing her in any way. She is just...
bonkers.
A mad person who has decided, I have this symbiotic relationship with this creature I found on the ground. And I'm going to make a poison to kill everybody in England and start a new world using what, but how, I don't know how she's not being poisoned by the leech.
That was going to be my next question. Was like, why, if it kills people, why isn't she dying from it?
Yeah.
Or is it slowly, like, meant to be killing her? I don't think so. I get the impression that she was just fine.
I don't think it was slowly killing her. I think it became like a symbiotic relationship where she was able to survive it.
And that's not something that happens. If something's poisonous to human beings and kills them, I guess, like, it preserves those other people somehow and turns them, like, to stone, kind of. But that's not happening to her either.
Yeah.
So this venom has 3 different effects depending on who it is, which doesn't make any sense.
And she's, like, experimenting on these people to figure out, like, she said something about that with her daughter, that it was trying to find out, like, not the antidote to the poison, but, like, how much of the poison a person can take and not die.
Right.
Which, okay. So I guess these vats of this poison have different strengths, and she's dipping people in them and figuring out, like, how strong does it need to be or how weak does it need to be for them to be preserved and still alive. But, like, they're alive, but then what good are they going to be to you? You've basically paralyzed them all and have them in like, cloches.
You're not restoring them. Like, we haven't seen her be able to restore them.
I guess she never got that far.
I really feel like if you're going to do this, maybe you should figure that part out first before you, like, just go and do it to everybody. I'm just thinking, like, out loud.
I mean, she's
how does
some
the doctor
kind of
bring Clara back?
He puts her in the locker, the same, like, locker thing that he went into to, like, reverse his. I think that whatever that chamber was that he went into has some kind of function that'll reverse the problem, but it doesn't explain how.
But I thought he used his sonic screwdriver on himself.
Had it in there with him. And I think didn't he, like, I don't remember now. I'm trying to think we don't see the whole process when she gets restored. Right? He puts her in there.
Yeah, she just kind of comes out and is just, like, dazed and like, oh, doctor, what happened?
Yeah, so I'm not really sure how he was able to bring her back.
I wonder if, like, the sonic screwdriver just turned on the function of the
reversal.
But, like, how did he know in the first place to go in there with
He's very, very smart.
What's her name? Jenny?
Jenny.
Because Jenny doesn't know the place. You know, she's not familiar. So she sure didn't go, oh, okay, here's the decalcification chamber. She has no fucking idea where anything is. Yeah, I guess it is just like, well, he's very smart. Okay, fine.
I was being sarcastic. Like, it was a callback, but it's not untrue.
It feels that way.
Case, like, he's very smart, I guess.
He
just figures.
So
But I did work all day, so.
Yes, you're very smart. Shut up.
Yeah, this episode is just very weird.
And the other thing that I found, what she's saying, oh, we'll start a new I guess the explanation for anything about why she's doing what she's doing is just she's crazy.
Yeah.
Which is a shame. I think that's the main problem I've got is just like, well, if you're just going to be like, oh, she's just like kind of bonkers and she hasn't got a plan. She doesn't know. That's not interesting. I want there to be like a real outcome here that she's like aiming for. Because she's wanting to like kill everybody on Earth and then have them like these like perfect choices of human beings wake up in what she's calling an Eden. But it sounds like everything will be dead.
Except for them.
And that's not really a world that you can like live in. Mm-mm. What do you think is going to happen to them? That's not Eden. Eden's like Eden because it's a land of milk and honey and you know, you just don't have to worry about getting by because everything is like, the land is so fertile that you just like fall into plates of hams and things like Right? That's how it says in the Bible, I think.
That's exactly what it says in the Bible, is that you fall into plates of ham.
But, you know, it's just meant to be like living is so effortless.
I want that on a bumper sticker.
I mean,
Eden,
be a
where you
postcard.
fall into plates of ham.
I was trying to think what to do for the postcard this month. Maybe that'll be it.
I mean, we're coming up on Thanksgiving. It's food related.
I thought that's what Eden was, that you just fell into plates of hams. I like the hams is what I picked too, because I don't even really like ham that much. Why did I pick that?
I think because you shared that recipe with me earlier, and I was like, what is this picture? It's like a slab of ham.
I think maybe you're right. That is what it was. It was just on my mind. Got ham on the brain. Ham brains. All right. So where were we? Oh, just talking about the weirdness of this. Like, honestly, can I be honest? I don't want to talk about this episode step by step.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because usually the notes that I get where they write out a recap of the episode is usually very detailed. And this is 6 paragraphs.
How many paragraphs are there normally?
It's usually much, much more.
Huh.
This is I actually had to double check, like, did I not copy and paste the whole thing?
Jamie, do me a favor. Read me these paragraphs. Go ahead. Just read them to me. What do they say?
Madame Vastra and her partners Jenny and Strax investigate the Crimson Horror, a mysterious condition leaving victims with red skin and preserved like statues, after discovering that one victim has the image of the 11th Doctor visible in one of his eyes. That's one paragraph.
I forgot about that whole fucking thing.
Yeah.
Why did that even matter? I guess it's because that's what, like, tips them off that they need to go down there, is that the Doctor's in this guy's eye.
Yeah. Investigations lead them to Sweetville, an idyllic community run by Mrs. Winifred Gillyflower and her never-seen silent partner, Mr. Sweet, apparently as a home for the chosen few to help them survive the coming apocalypse. Jenny goes undercover as a convert and infiltrates Sweetville, where she discovers the Doctor chained up in a cell, but only partially preserved. The process didn't work because he is not human. Gillyflower tends to dispose of such rejects, but he has been saved by her blind daughter, Ada Gillyflower, who has become infatuated with him and describes him as my monster. These are very basic paragraphs about what happened in the episode, but it kind of speaks to there not being a lot of details in this episode to even write about.
Right.
The next one is about the Doctor. The Doctor is able to reverse the process on himself, and he and Jenny go off in search of his companion Clara, who has also been preserved. This confuses Jenny as she saw Clara killed by the Ice Woman months earlier. The Doctor tells Jenny that he and Clara were actually aiming to visit London in 1893, but they instead arrived in Yorkshire. They immediately got involved in the investigation of Sweetville. The Doctor and Clara, posing as a married couple, joined the Sweetville community to investigate, but Mrs. Gillyflower imprisoned and preserved them. The process worked on Clara, but not the Doctor. Ada locked him away, keeping him as her special monster. Then the next one's about getting Clara reversed, and all it says is the preservation process on Clara is successfully reversed. And Madame Vastra says the substance used to create the Crimson Horror effect is the poison of the Red Leech, a parasite the Silurians considered a major threat 65 million years ago. They confront Mrs. Gillyflower, who explains her plan, reveals the Red Leech. Their plan is to launch a rocket into the skies over England and spread the leech's poison over the planet. Ada learns of her mother's plans and confronts her. Meanwhile, Clara disables the rocket launch controls. What it's not saying is with a chair.
True. She has a chair.
Mrs. Gillyflower holds a gun to her daughter's head, retreats into the rocket silo to activate a secondary launch control. She launches the rocket, but learns moments later that Vastra and Jenny have removed the poison payload. She fires at the Doctor, but Mrs. Strax shoots at Mrs. Gillyflower, causing her to tumble and die. As the old woman lays dying, Mr. Sweet abandons his host. Ada shares final words with her mother before brutally killing the parasite with her cane, causing his innards to spurt out! Exclamation point.
We needed that detail for sure. Forget
Later,
the plot
Doctor
holes. I want to know what happens to his innards.
Later, the Doctor returns Clara to her 21st century home, where she discovers that the two children she helps care for, Angie and Artie Maitland, have found images of her and the Doctor in different points in time, including a nuclear submarine in 1983 and a manor house in 1974. There's a picture of Clara that she does not recognize. It was taken in Victoria, London, but she's only been to Victorian Yorkshire. The children threaten to inform their father that their nanny is a time traveler until she takes them on a trip in her time machine.
All right, let's talk about this ending.
Okay.
I feel like you've covered all the main bases, and obviously they have no interest in filling in the spots that we're wondering about.
There's usually way more detail in these things, because I'm usually able, if you have a question, I can go back and like find what you're talking about and be like, okay, this is what Wiki says.
Okay, yeah. But yeah, it's very broad strokes. Like, if I were going to give my own synopsis of the episode, that's about what I would have said.
I've never seen a synopsis on this site so bare bones.
So let's talk about the ending where Clara is like, I was in Victorian Yorkshire, and
yeah,
girl, you're time traveling. It's possible, don't you think, that you wind up in Victorian London at some other point.
That's a good thing to point out. There's also the fact that the Doctor mentions to her in the last episode that he has met her twice before, and she's like, that's not me. But she doesn't remember that because he rebooted the day.
He rebooted the day.
Remember how he the TARDIS had the big crack in it, and in order to he reset the day inside the TARDIS so that they never get captured by that group of scavengers, those three brothers.
Oh, right. Okay, gotcha.
So that sort of resets the day, and so that conversation he had with Clara where he was like, who are you? What are you? And she was like, what are you talking about? What do you mean? And he's like, I've met you twice before. And she's like, no, you didn't. That was not me. She doesn't remember any of that.
Oh.
So this Clara is that Clara. The one that was a nanny that was killed by the Ice Woman. But Clara doesn't know that, and she doesn't remember that the Doctor mentioned that he met her in Victorian London.
Right.
But you're right. She could have been like, well, I guess
we go there at some point.
We go there at some point, yeah.
Because that was where he intended to take her.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just have been like, oh, I guess we wind up going there eventually after all.
Right. I don't know. It's time travel.
Yeah.
What I like about this whole end scene is that these kids figured this out. And she's like, no, that's just someone who looks like me. And they're like, yeah, it's you. You're a time traveler. Take us on your time machine. Because that's exactly how kids would react. They'd be like, I want to go on a time machine.
Kids would react. But also, their threat of oh, well, we'll tell our dad. Yeah. I'm like, all right, go fucking tell your dad. Let's see what the fuck he has to say about your suggestion that I'm a time traveler.
Right.
I'm very interested to see how he would react. I'm not worried about it, is all I'm saying.
It was the only part of the episode where I was like, oh, here we go. Okay. This is good. I like because this is actually the first time that a companion's family or people that the companion knows outside of the Doctor have figured out what's going on without meeting the Doctor or being taken onto the TARDIS first.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
These kids just, one of them, I don't remember if it was the boy or I think it was the boy. It was like, yeah, my teacher had this picture and it's you. And then we just started looking. And they somehow found all these other pictures online of Clara.
I want to know how they did that.
Yeah. They're better with computers than she is.
That's true. Yeah, you know what I would have liked, I think, is if because just being like, oh, we found pictures of you, that could be photoshopped. There could be any number of explanations for that. That really didn't work for me either, I gotta be honest. I would have liked it if they got their suspicion that she was a time traveler, and then they started to fucking, keep an eye on her and follow her and watch her get into the TARDIS and then began to be like, all right, so what we thought is what's happening.
Kids are dumb.
Because they just come at her with this, like, we're going to blackmail you. And I'm like, well, guys, to be honest, y'all don't really have a lot. She could easily just let you tell your dad, and your dad would laugh in your face. And that really is what she should do. Because Clara behaves as if they've really got her, and she doesn't know how to handle this now. And I'm like, nah, girl, that sounds insane. And it sounds like the kind of thing that kids would come up with if they were just reading a little bit too much fantasy novel or something. Yeah. And I really don't think that you have anything that you need to worry about in that regard. Because it seems like, based on the way this ends, like she's going to cave to their demands. And I'm just like, Clara, weak. You don't need to do that. Just so you don't call their bluff and see what they do.
So you don't want to see her take these kids on some crazy adventure?
Because
what if they end up on one of these crazy planets where they're immediately put in danger?
You all know how I feel about children and storylines. It's not like I don't like children, because honestly, I do enjoy kids. It's that most child actors are not good, and most storylines that involve kids rely on kids, disobedient. It's almost always like, this kid just did a thing they weren't supposed to do. This kid did something they were explicitly told not to. And you needed somebody to do something stupid. And no adult would be that fucking stupid, so we brought a child. And we're going to pin that on them. Which is, frankly, unfair. Because do kids disobey? Sure. But kids are, like, so much smarter than adults like to give them credit for. And we just like always like to just be like, well, some kid fucked it up. And I'm just like, it doesn't have to be this way. So I don't really want them to come because I don't really know if they are going to suck or not. What if they suck?
I wonder, and we have some super fans that could tell me, if there have ever been kids taken on the TARDIS adventures before.
The TARDIS adventures. Yeah. It's like the Poseidon adventure.
I mean, sometimes it kind of is.
True, actually.
I know, like, I think most companions have always been adults, so I'm just curious if there's ever been kids that have been taken along.
Yeah. I mean, I would have to assume that would eventually happen. You can't avoid them forever. But
I mean, you could try with a time machine. It'd be a lot easier.
True. Unless they catch you, like this. But yeah, and the main way that I would like this is if she, like, caved to their demands, but then their dad found out anyway. Which I would really like. Like...
And she gets fired?
No. She'd be like the revitalization that his sad life needed because he was in mourning and had given up on living, and then all of a sudden was given a new lease on life because of the unknown suddenly being exciting, and et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
Sort of like, she's like Manic Pixie Dream Girl, except really it's a doctor that's the Manic Pixie Dream Girl.
He really is.
Yeah, he comes in and just sort of like whooshes around and leaves them spinning with their hair mussed going, my goodness.
Is that what Manic Pixie Dream Girls do?
Yeah, right? Like, they just like...
Is that how Joseph Gordon-Levitt behaved in 50 Days of Summer, whatever, 500 Days of Summer?
50 Days of Summer.
Just constantly going, my
Shades
goodness.
Of Summer.
Isn't that what that movie was? I don't remember.
That was one of those good movies where he acted like an asshole and the movie completely called him out on it, and it was wonderful. I loved it so much.
I did really like that movie. That's the one that people tend to call to for, like, the Manic Pixie Dream Girl, like, apex.
Yeah, I could see that. I just really enjoy the fact that he, she just sort of looks at him and is like, what are you doing? That's not, I was very, straight up with you from the beginning, and you turned this into a whole thing. Not my fault. Yeah. Amen, sister. Yeah. what else? Such a weird one. I feel like this might be the weirdest one so far.
It is really weird. Yeah. Especially because there's no real, like... There's a lot of stuff, but no real plot.
Substance.
Yeah.
It's just sort of an incoherent, like, oh, crazy shit happened.
Yeah. This crazy lady, played by Dame Diana Rigg, which, by the way, she's credited as Dame Diana Rigg.
Oh, I didn't know she was a dame.
Yeah. And one of the pieces of trivia that I read was that no one else who is a knighted person who's been on this show went by Sir Ian McKellen or Sir Michael Gambon. But she was Dame Diana Rigg. And I would like to believe that her agent was like, excuse me, if she's going to do Doctor Who, she's going to be credited as Dame Diana Rigg.
Please respond appropriately.
Yeah.
I like that. You know, if you earned the Dame, use that shit. Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
She's a goddamn queen. I'm sad she died. Love that woman.
That makes me think. Have I told you about that podcast where a guy like was trying to paraphrase what Sinatra songs are like? And
no.
He just starts singing randomly and he says, I've got a dame. She likes being abroad.
That is a very accurate description of a Sinatra song.
And that is one of those, like, anytime I hear the word dame now, I immediately think, does she like being abroad? Immediately after. I just can't get it out of my head now. It's just they're fused together.
So this has a little call to a Sherlock story. An unrecorded Sherlock Holmes adventure that is mentioned in The Adventure of the Golden Pince-Nez, which I looked up to see. Is that a thing? Yeah, it's a Sherlock Holmes story. Called The Repulsive Case of the Red Leech.
Oh, that's why they mentioned that so specifically. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And that calls back to the earlier episode where that guy is like, you know, people have been saying that you are who Sherlock Holmes is based on. About Vastra.
Right.
Yeah. So I like that little,
makes sense.
That
also,
little detail.
I don't think that this is a tie-in to that specifically, but I'm pretty sure the external shot of Vastra's house, that like white, you know, on the high street,
mm-hmm.
is the same location that they used, at least for the external shot, for, what's her name? The woman who's the dominatrix in Sherlock.
You're asking the wrong person.
You guys know who I'm talking about. The woman, as he calls her. The woman.
The woman.
But yeah, that house, I'm almost positive, is the same house. So that probably is only just because, what's-his-face just liked the look of it and remembered it and was like, let's use that again. Because it's very opulent looking while also being really understated. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so that's a sort of like weird real world tie-in between her and Sherlock. Weirdly.
I think it's fun. Stephen Moffat obviously has a liking of Sherlock Holmes, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like I don't know where else to go with talking about this.
This episode was written by Mark Gatiss, who he
just does not do well, does he?
His stories are usually a little more fun.
I feel like when I've had major problems, it's been him.
Let me look and see which ones he's written again. People are screaming at me because I'm sure they know offhand, but I don't remember.
Everybody calm down. Leave Jamie alone.
Mark Gatiss.
Yeah.
Every time I see him now, I see the screen cap in my mind that you made of him in that episode where he was turning into a monster.
What?
The one where he plays the like guy who, the one with
the Lazarus thing.
Yeah,
I forgot that was what a fucking image that was.
Every time I see his face, I picture that. All right, so he did The Unquiet Dead, Which one was that? Quiet Dead. The Idiot's Lantern, which was a TV one where Rose's face gets taken off.
I liked that one, I think.
The Victory of the Daleks, which was the World War II with Amy and the Doctor. And Churchill.
Right.
Night Terrors. Was that the hotel one? No. Night Terrors was the one with the little boy who was actually an alien.
So that was the one at the apartment complex, which I did actually like that one. So maybe I'm being too hard on him. Maybe I'm misremembering, and he's not actually.
Yeah. And then Crimson Horror, and Cold War, the one with Davos.
Okay, and that one I did have a problem with.
Yeah, so he's sort of a mixed bag. He's done 9 episodes. There's 3 more that we have not seen yet. So we'll have to see how he feels towards the end of his run, but. He wrote quite a few Sherlock episodes, though.
I was about to ask what other stuff he's written. Okay.
He co-created it with Stephen Moffat.
Did he write The Blind Banker? Tell me he didn't. Because if he did, then that's just it. That's a wrap on Mark Gatiss.
He wrote The Great Game, The Hounds of Baskerville.
That one's not awesome. Okay.
Many Happy Returns. The Empty Hearse.
That one's pretty good.
The Abominable Bride. The Six Thatchers. And The Final Problem.
It's a final problem. I don't remember a lot of those, so I will retract my sullying of his reputation. Apologies, sir. I should not have spoken so freely of your skills or my alleging that they were lacking.
I'm sorry, he's been in something called Sex Lives of the Potato Men?
Maybe I don't take it back.
I really want to sit down and have a conversation with this man, because I feel like he must be very interesting.
Sex Lives of the Potato... Is it Potato Men, plural, or man?
Potato Men.
Wow. More than one of them. All right. I'm just like thinking there's some stuff has just weird titling that you're like, who was in charge of coming up with a name for that? The Men Who Stare at Goats. There goes a title that's like equally just like, what? Why?
Yeah.
Anyway.
He's in The Crimson Petal and the White.
I'm trying to think if there's anything really... The one thing I will say that this episode had going for it is the performance of her daughter. I thought was excellent. She's really good.
She is really good. I'm going to look her up right now because I meant to look her up.
She's really good at making, like... She has this feeling when she's devastated by her mother, like, rejecting her, that feels very real to me. The reaction that she has when the doctor gives her a kiss on the cheek is like sort of heartbreaking, actually, because there's this feeling of her never really being touched, and being sort of starved for that. I don't really understand how she could have kept the doctor and her mother never found him. I don't know, because until she tells her mother and confesses the way that she does, I was under the assumption that her mother was letting her keep the doctor as like a bit of a treat. You know, you can have a tiny prisoner for a treat. But then it turns out that her mother didn't know. And I'm like, okay, but your mom isn't the one who's blind. So how did she not see this like actual prison door with a doggy flap at the bottom and not want to know what the fuck was going on in there? Because it's not like this is in amongst a bunch of other prison doors that they use a prison for another thing with other people. Right? Like, this is just the one door in a hallway that's, like, connected to their living quarters.
And it's the same hallway where they take people to be dunked into the tank. Is it not? I
can say that I don't have a great understanding of the geography of where people are taken for any of that procedure. Cause like when the doctor is like running around with Jenny and they look through a window and she sees them being dunked, I really didn't understand where in the property they were.
Yeah. I just feel like Jenny she goes into that, okay, another thing unexplained. Big room with big, gigantic Victrolas.
Yeah.
Playing the sound of machinery so that it sounds like a factory. Mm-hmm. And that's it.
Yeah, I guess, like, because we're meant to let them believe that we're, like, producing something here.
But let who believe?
The people who are, like, outside trying to sign up for the, like, to stay at Sweetville. But I didn't feel like we were given, as an audience, any indication that this was a production plant.
Yeah.
So I didn't understand that they needed to keep up a charade like this specifically.
Right. It's not Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. It's supposed to be a place to go and live.
So, I don't know. Like, is it meant to be like this is covering up the sound of their screams? Like, what?
Maybe, but then you would only really need to make that noise when you're dunking the people into the vat.
Yeah, true. Because I was actually going to say I liked that scene because it was real spooky. You know, there's the sound and then she goes in and there's nothing and it's just a recording.
It's great imagery, and I feel like that's why it was done. These gigantic Victrolas, which you would never have something like that. It looks really cool. Yeah,
that is a bit of a like temptation that this show does not often resist, is like, that doesn't really make sense, but we're going to do it because it looks cool. Mm-hmm. You know, that moment in the haunted house episode where like, help me appears on the wall, even though it doesn't make any sense that she would be able to write that. It's just sort of, well, but it's spooky though, isn't it? And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, if that's all you care about, then okay, sure. And it sort of reminded me, there was a Unspooked episode that I did where this guy who worked in the Forest Service was describing him and his friend going into the woods because they heard this little girl crying, and they were trying to, because kids get lost all the time and they just assumed some kid got separated from their parents. And they started to realize that something was sort of off about it. And then they heard this like tinniness to it as they got closer. And all of a sudden they realized that the crying was on a loop and it was a recording. And they just got the fuck out of there and never like found out exactly what was going on. But they were incredibly creeped out by it. So this reminded me of that. And in that way I was like, oh, that is real creepy. What are they doing? But then it just never actually paid off. So I kind of forgot about it until you brought it up. And I was like, oh, yeah, I actually thought that was awesome. But now that I think about it, it didn't have anything to do with anything. Why did she name him Mr. Sweet? Where's that from?
Why was she putting little bits of salt into her shirt to feed him?
I would think a leech's salt would be like to a slug. Wouldn't that kill it?
I mean, I don't know that much about leeches, but they're slug-like, so I would think that it would hurt them.
Also, I thought when he says it seems like the two of you are very close, and she says incredibly close or something like that, I immediately was like, oh shit, this thing's attached to her. But I thought it was going to be that it was in her hat, like Voldemort, where it was like in his turban. Spoilers for Harry Potter. The fact that Quirrell's got a turban that has Voldemort's head in it. But yeah, that is 100% what I thought was going to happen, was that she was going to take off this giant hat. And instead, she pulls the front of her dress down, which just felt so much creepier in like a human creepy way and not creepy in like an alien way. I wanted this thing to be attached to her brain. And in the way that it was like just behind the collar of her dress was so much sillier and goofier.
Yeah. Poor Diana Rigg.
I don't understand why it had to look like a lobster either. That's not scary. A leech is revolting. Repulsive. As the, Silurians? Not them?
Yes, Silurians.
Why did they make it look like that? It was so silly looking. When I saw it, I was like, oh, okay, I guess it's not the leech, was my first thought. But then it is the leech anyway. And I got very confused because it just looked like it. You know what? It really looked like a shrimp in a way as well. But yeah, just there's a lot left to be desired in this episode. That's all I'm saying. It's fine.
They can't all be perfect.
I'll say it is fun to talk about. I'll say that. It's a good time for me to just like rag on it because it is hilarious actually when you stop and think about some of these things.
There's so much weirdness in it, but none of it seems to be connected to each other.
Yeah. It's like a fever dream this is like, honestly, if I tried to tell Owen about this, he would be like, I don't want to hear about one of your crazy dreams. And everybody was turned bright red and frozen.
There was a image of the last thing they saw frozen in the pupil of their eye.
Which,
and
why
it was
is
the
that what
doctor's
happened?
face.
Why did that happen?
I don't know.
He said something about like, unless something changed the chemistry of their DNA. And I was like, no. Even if something were to do that, that doesn't change the structure and function of like the cones and retina and whatnot of your eyeball. That's not how that works.
We would be remiss if we did not talk about Strax just a little bit, because everybody knows you love that potato man.
He is delightful.
He's so funny. Keeps trying to blow things up with grenades.
He just wants to fight, and honestly, same. I relate a lot, Strax. I feel you, buddy. And I really appreciate that he winds up being the one who like sort of saves the day with his gun just turning up. When you know, he keeps getting sort of shooed away. Just like, you know.
I mean, he lives in Victorian London where you don't have space guns.
Mm-hmm.
I also liked the guy who hires Vastra keeps fainting every time he sees something weird. And that's such a good, like, you're so used to women in, especially media that has to do with that era, are always, that's why there are fainting couches. These women were always swooning, mostly because they couldn't breathe.
Right.
Because they're corsets, but also because women are just so weak. And this guy just keeps passing out, and I just think it's hilarious.
Yeah, he's, really, you would think he would get used to Strax, because isn't the faint at the end due to Strax again?
Oh, no, the faint at the end is because he sees the TARDIS disappearing.
Oh, okay. So I was about to be
but
like, sir.
He faints when he sees Vastra, when she takes her veil off. He faints when he sees Strax, and then he faints when he sees the TARDIS.
I really enjoy the fact that Strax and Vastra don't put that much effort into hiding their faces from people.
Yeah.
There's something about the fact that they're just like, I don't know, whatever. You guys will deal with it. It'll be fine.
I mean, he doesn't try at all.
No, that's true.
He's out there riding around
like that.
On a coach, like talking to children on the street.
Oh, that little kid that's like a fucking map quest.
He's a GPS. Apparently, it's an obvious reference, according to these notes, to the popular real-world GPS service TomTom. His name was Thomas.
Oh, my God. Oh, I love how obvious a reference that was at one time. Because TomTom just isn't really a thing now.
Yeah.
But at the time, like, oh, that's so good. Oh, this was all worth it. Now I like it. What a weird joke. Thomas. Fuck, I wondered what that was about. I meant to bring it up, but because we didn't do this step by step, it's like, but to be clear, I don't regret not doing it step by step. I'm just saying that's hilarious. I love it because it's a pretty good joke, but also it's so dated that it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
That's a really beautiful little snapshot of like pop culture and how that can go sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Because this is 2013, I think.
I remember an era where I got my fucking... Remember when the iPhone didn't come with maps? They didn't have Apple Maps yet.
No, by the time I got an iPhone, which was 3 or 4 years after it came out, it had maps already on it.
Okay, so not only did they not have their own maps thing, but Google didn't have maps yet either, I don't think. And the apps for maps, God, that sounds goofy, were crazy expensive. I remember trying to convince Brendan that we should pay the $50 for TomTom or Garmin. It was one of them, for their Maps app.
You know what?
I was so
totally
certain
wrong.
that it wasn't going to be like available free ever.
My iPhone did not have maps on it when I first got it, because when I moved from Rhode Island, I was driving, because I was moving to go live with Jason in Oklahoma, and I had to buy a GPS, and I didn't want to buy, I bought the Garmin app for my phone.
Aha.
And used that as my GPS to drive across the country.
And wasn't it a small fortune?
It cost me like $40.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think like the one that I was looking at, it wasn't even just the one app that did it. It was like you had to buy separate apps for different sections of the country.
Oh, mine was just one GPS.
Yeah, the one that I was looking at, it was like there was one for the Northeast, Southeast, Southwest. It was like each was different. And now you can find where you want to go in 30 seconds for free on a variety of apps. And it's bananas. Guys, I don't know how we even lived. What?
When I moved to LA, I had to buy a Thomas guide so that I could learn my way around LA. And it was a big spiral book. It cost me $45, I think. And I'd have to flip through and find the section of the map where I lived and figure out how to get places. And I used it for a few weeks, and then I ended up learning my way around, and I never used it again.
It was called the Thomas Guide? Is that related to the TomTom?
I'm not sure, but it was called a Thomas Guide, and that used to be like the most comprehensive maps you could get, because it was literally like every page was very detailed, and, you know, on each section of the city, and the bigger the city, the bigger the book, obviously. Huh. I kind of wish I still had it, because what a relic.
Yeah, you could probably find it somewhere.
I could. I'm not going to. But if I was like that nostalgic and I still had it, I'd be like, oh, this is fun. Let's find that page when I got lost trying to find AutoZone.
Oh, that was the worst. That was like, I moved to London before I even had a cell phone. And just had to wander around and hope to get where I needed to go, and would check like the tube map on the wall of the tube and hope that the stop that I picked was mostly right. Yeah. And just fucking like figure it out. And it didn't always go my way, let me tell you.
The first time I went to New York, well, it was the second time I went, but the first time that I spent more than like a day and a half there, I had to buy I didn't have a map on my phone yet. I don't think I even had a iPhone yet. And I had to buy a map. And, like, I would consult it before I left the hotel and make sure, and I'd write notes.
Yep.
Take this street to get to this train, get on the subway, get off at this stop. And, like, I learned my way around doing that. I was there for, like, 5 days and apparently got pretty good at it because people kept stopping me and asking me for directions. And I was like, wow, I must really look like I know what I'm doing. I just knew how to walk from the Met back to my hotel. Like, I don't know what I'm doing.
I remember, like, just the printing out of directions is its own, like, particular period in history as well.
Yeah.
Because I think about, like, MapQuest and having to print, and, like, if you didn't have a printer...
Yeah, you had to write all that shit down.
You had to write it, copy it off of the fucking computer, which is just...
Ugh, let's go back even further. My best friend was in the Navy, and she came home for Christmas, bought a car from her uncle, and then had to drive it to Pensacola from Arizona. and asked me if I wanted to drive across the country with her. So I was like, yeah, sure. Her dad got AAA and did what was called a triptych, which were detailed directions on how to get from where we were to where we were going. And it was a little flip book.
It was a book?
It was a little flip book little spiral notebook that they printed out for us. And we would flip it. Okay, so now we're in Houston and these are the directions we need to get through Houston.
Wow.
Because we didn't want to buy a crazy big map of the United States. We knew we had to basically be on the 10 from Arizona to Pensacola, but we needed to know if we get off the highway. So there were these little maps. The pages would fold out and we'd have a little map of this area of where we were going to be. It was crazy.
God.
We're lucky we didn't get lost.
I mean, that's the thing is, apparently before we had all this shit, we got by.
Yeah.
But it sucked.
Yeah.
Let's all be honest with ourselves. It really sucked. Especially if you were in a situation where you couldn't write down the directions and you were getting them from a person. That in particular is a bad situation because let me tell you all, people are not to be relied upon to give directions, especially when they're super familiar with an area. Because oftentimes they take for granted that you're going to notice things or that you know something already that you definitely don't.
In Rhode Island, the street signs are all really small. And when I first moved back there, my aunt was like, okay, so you go down this street and then you turn where the old Almax used to be. And I'm like, look, I don't know what you're talking about. You're going to need to give me better directions. Because everything that when they would give directions, it was by landmarks.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Exactly.
And I'm like, but I don't know, what direction is that in? What road am I going to be on?
Well, you go about a quarter mile that way until you get to the old Gardner place, sir.
Yeah, basically. And you get to where that street light is, but it used to just be a 4-way stop. No, I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't lived here since I was 10. I didn't drive back then. It always felt like it took 4 years to get to Massachusetts. It was an hour.
I love that 30% of this episode is us talking about how plot holes in this show are real. 10% is talking about the number of plot holes in this episode. And then the other 60% is us laughing at the Tom joke and talking about directions. That feels appropriate.
That's the kind of content people come here for.
This is what they deserve when they write episodes like this. That's all I'm saying. It's you bring this upon yourselves, writers.
I really just want to have a conversation with Mark Gatiss. I just want to know.
Where did this fucking come from, sir?
Did he write this on mushrooms?
This feels like he had a dream and was just it'd be good. People who turn red for some reason. I haven't got it all ironed out yet, but trust me, it's going to look weird.
Was he blackmailing Stephen Moffat for something? No, you're going to let me write this episode. And you're going to air it.
I just wish I cared about Clara more.
I know.
That's where I come down at the end of every single one of these, is wanting to give a shit about the mystery with her and just not really in any direction. It's the sort of thing that if I were watching this, really, I would have gone online to find out by now. And I don't really do that. But I think I'd just be super impatient and just be like, oh, just tell me, whatever.
I honestly wonder if that's why so many people didn't like her, especially during this season.
I could see that. It seems like the kind of thing where it's if you can't put your finger on it, but you didn't like her, that feels like that's the plot problem.
Yeah.
You know?
I know I've said this before, but I would really like people to send me a message and let me know. If you didn't like Clara, please tell me what were your reasons? Not because I like her so much that I want to defend her, but I honestly want to know, because when these were first airing, I liked Clara, but I think that's because I like Jenna Coleman a lot. And so I forgave, and I also wasn't watching the show very critically or very closely at this point. I was kind of half checked out of Doctor Who for a while.
Yeah.
But there are some people out there that really, really hate Clara. That she is their least favorite companion, and I'd like to know why. Is it because there just wasn't enough substance to her? Or was it a reaction, much like how I felt after after 10 left and it went into 11, I had a hard time, like, feeling a lot of affection for him as a character, even though I really liked Matt Smith's performances, because I was still sort of bitter about David Tennant leaving. So is it because Amy's so beloved, did people then just dislike Clara because of that? I really want to know.
Yeah, that feels like that might be more what it was. Just feeling salty.
I know Jason's sister really didn't like her, so if anybody, please, Jess, send me a text message and let me know why you don't like Clara. I just want to figure it out, because
you also have to go onto the Mighty Network, because I'm pretty sure some people left comments on the last episode post mentioning it. So,
I tend to not read all the comments on things, because it's a lot of comments on a lot of posts over there, and I sometimes don't read them all. So I should specifically go look at the Doctor Who ones.
Yeah, I feel like some people have mentioned.
Okay.
But I don't have it in front of me, and I don't want to paraphrase because I don't have a good...
Yeah, I'll go do that right after we stop and read through them. I just want to know, because I feel like I don't dislike her, but I don't necessarily like her either. Like, there's just not enough for me to attach to one way or the other.
The one thing that I remember, I think was posted today in the episode that just went up, was I think Austin Arminio said that Clara's character was the first time that he ever heard the term Mary Sue used in the negative way that it's used now a lot of the time. Which I don't feel like I've gotten enough into what's going on with her to feel that way, because to me, the only thing that we've ever really been able to like see her do is the computer stuff, which was kind of like given to her because of a weird like mental assault that happened. So for me, Mary Sue usually means like, oh, you happen to be like really good at everything for no good reason. When I think of a Mary Sue, I think of like Nancy Drew, somebody like that. And to me, Clara doesn't fit that description in any way, but
I don't think Clara's a Mary Sue. I honestly, back when it was originally airing, felt that Amy was a Mary Sue. At first.
Yeah, I don't see that either.
I just felt like she was just instantly, like, good at things and took to the time travel in, a very... I don't know. I don't know what my problem... I think my problem was a lot of things.
Good at?
I don't know. I back then, I didn't like her very much, and everybody loved her, and I was like, no. I thought she was more of a Mary Sue, but I don't think that now, and I'm not entirely sure why I thought it then. I think I was just very bitter.
Gotcha.
At the start. Austin did say that. She was the first character I heard called Mary Sue, and it's new female character I don't like context. But I don't get that at all, because she's not great at things. Yeah,
she's like constantly getting rescued. It doesn't feel like she's usually the one that like pulls things out completely. Like, it's not like she doesn't do anything. She picks up a chair. That's good. Bashes a thing. The Doctor's already going to do it with his own, like, it's just, And also, like I said, I haven't gotten to know her very well. It's only been on 7 episodes, and she hasn't even been the same person for all of those. So, but I guess we'll see. All right. I'm going to wrap this up. Is there anything that you want to add, ma'am?
Nope, we did not get any reviews this week, so I don't have anything to add.
Okay. Everybody, reminder that next week will be the last episode before Thanksgiving break, so that will be there will be a 2-week break after that one before we get the next episode. So just mentally prepare yourselves for that. And I think I already said that the week after Christmas there will also not be one, because I'm taking the Christmas week off. And Miles and I just finished Midnight Sun. Thank God. And we are we're going to do a like sort of recap Mistborn episode to refresh ourselves before the break. And then we will start on the second Mistborn book after Thanksgiving. So if you are a patron, then keep your eye out for that. And if you are wanting to listen and not a patron, you can become one at patreon.com/unspoiled. And also, Rashawn and I are getting deeper into Song of Ice and Fire, and we finally got to a chapter that's very heavy on the sigils and house names, which there hasn't been a ton of that, but these chapters it's a lot, because we're both at the Hand's Tourney, which everybody gets sort of announced as they come out. And then we have Catelyn calling her father's bannerman when she takes Tyrion prisoner. And there's a ton of, like, you know, your family is blah, 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 with the 3 rampant lions on a dragon, whatever. Chevron shit. So we're getting into, like, the real, like, Song of Ice and Fire-y stuff that the show didn't do a ton of. And this is the stuff that I'm excited about getting into because it's so nerdy and so, like...
One of my favorite ones, I think maybe the Fossaways are the ones with the apples on their sigil or something.
Oh, I forgot about that whole thing. I don't think we've met them yet. I think that we don't meet them until, like, the second book, actually.
And then there's, like, the brambles and something else, and they've been fighting forever over one little piece of land. Mm-hmm. Oh, my God. I love all that shit.
I've always just been a fan of the Manderleys with their mermaid.
Yeah, I love the Manderleys.
And the fact that he's, like, too fat to sit on a horse. Because, like, same, probably. I don't know I don't know for sure, but I have a guess that most horses would not like me on their back.
He makes a good Frey pie, though.
Listen. So gross. All right, guys. Well, thank you all again so much for listening. Hope that you've been enjoying the coverage, even though we were really not into this one.
This one's like understand. Doctor Who in, like, quotation marks.
I really, truly, if y'all have, like, additional info that feels like it pulls more of this together, I am open to it. I would like to know what bullshit explanation y'all can cobble together. And I'm just going to say it because that's how I feel it's going to be. I want to know about it. So please share and be prepared for me to laugh at you, but it will all be in good fun. Mostly.
Yeah. It'll be fun.
It'll be in good fun. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
Yeah. Bye.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.